or treat. Home automation is great fun at Halloween. You can go all out with super expensive lights and special sound systems, or you can do what I've done and link together things that you might already have for very little cost. And I'm going to show you how I put together my little spooky automation for the trick-or-treaters this year. One of the core components of the automation is a smart doorbell. Reolink have kindly sent me their wired Wi-Fi doorbell so as I can show you its capabilities. This particular doorbell is Wi-Fi connected, but it does have an Ethernet port inside. It will still need to be powered separately, but they also sell a power over Ethernet version. For this wired Wi-Fi one though, if you already have a powered doorbell, then it's just a case of using your existing wiring. Included in the box is a power supply with a long cable, plus an optional wedge to get the best angle, and a mains powered indoor chime. I installed it instead of my old Ring Pro doorbell, and the whole process took under half an hour. I reused the existing wiring and power supply. I had to drill one extra hole and use the wedge to angle the lens away from the wall. This white version of the doorbell has a head-to-toe vertical aspect ratio, but if you prefer a wider aspect ratio, then you can get the black version. There is a battery-powered, fully wireless version of this doorbell coming soon, but unfortunately it wasn't available in time for me to make this video. But crucially, these doorbells work with Home Assistant, so as we can act on events like motion detection and doorbell button presses. The wired doorbell I'm showing here will work just fine on its own, but if you end up getting the fully wireless one, then you will also need the Reolink Home Hub. This sits inside your home, connected to your network. You can put a couple of micro SD cards in it and configure it to store all of your recordings centrally, which means that you don't have to pay for a cloud subscription or have an SD card in each camera. But most importantly, it bridges your battery-powered Reolink cameras to Home Assistant. I'm making use of the Reolink doorbell to do two things. Firstly, it's going to detect motion as people approach the house and send that event to Home Assistant. Secondly, when people press the doorbell button, it will send an event to Home Assistant to trigger an automation. Now, of course, you don't need to use a Reolink doorbell for this. You could use other brands of smart doorbells if you can connect them to Home Assistant. I know that Ring doorbells will work just the same, but if you're a regular viewer of this channel, then you'll know that I'm trying to get away from Ring because I don't want to pay that subscription fee anymore. Another neat feature of the Reolink doorbells is auto reply. You can record your own message that will be played back over the doorbell speaker when someone rings it.
Ooh, spooky.
Ooh, spooky.
I won't be using that feature in this automation, but it's there if you want it, and I've heard a rumour that there might be some special Halloween themed auto replies being added to the app soon. If you don't have a smart doorbell, then you could use a smart button like the Zigbee ones from IKEA, and if you want to detect motion, then you can use a cheap motion sensor such as this one, which is also from IKEA. Basically, see if you can use what you already have. For the lights, I have used two cheap Energizer Smart RGB LED bulbs, which I picked up for about £5 each from B&M. One of them is my test bulb, which I keep in a special bulb holder, and the other is hidden in an outdoor light fitting next to my front door. These bulbs connect to Wi-Fi using Toya SmartLife, which means that they connect very easily to Home Assistant, but they are very basic and don't have any special effect presets at all. So to make things a little bit more interesting, I've also used a special LED controller module from SMLight. This is the SLWF03. It's powered by a regular USB-C power supply and connects to an addressable RGB LED strip. Inside the little white box is an ESP32 microprocessor, so if you're feeling very adventurous, then you can flash this with whatever code you like, such as ESP Home. But by default, it comes flashed with WLED. Now, I was quite new to WLED, but basically what you end up with is a fancy web interface that lets you control the LEDs and any special effects. Because I'm using an addressable strip, I can actually show different colours on the strip in different places at the same time. So this is the configuration web interface that you get for WLED, and it's pretty comprehensive, and it looks quite a lot to start with. But all you're effectively doing is creating presets. So you can see down the side here, I've got a number of presets, one called Candle, Dancing Shadows, Red Breathe, Red Strobe and Sound Reactive. And I can activate those and by clicking on them, and you can see that they change all of the different effects on the left hand side. You can of course just go through and select your special effects however you like, and you can customize the colors that are being used, the foreground color or the background color. This module is actually sound reactive, and against some of these presets you should be able to see this little music symbol. So you can do something like the gravimeter, and then when you start clapping your hands or it hears music, it will start flashing all sorts of different colors depending on what you've configured, like a random cycle or aqua flash. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful names here. But the important thing to know is these presets here, you configure whatever you want and set it as a preset. Then when you go back over to Home Assistant here, you can actually choose the preset from this drop-down list. And this drop-down list, it's of course just an input select entity, and you can just call whatever preset you need in your automation. And finally, I needed to create some noise, some very loud noise. And for this, I used an old Sonos One speaker. The great thing about Sonos speakers is that you can use Home Assistant to send it the location of an MP3 file to play. So I've hidden the Sonos in the garage behind the door and set it to play very loudly. Okay, so those are the components we are working with then. The Reolink doorbell, 2 cheap Toya Smart Life bulbs, an SMLight LED controller and a Sonos One speaker. Now we need to put this all together by creating an automation in Home Assistant. So now we come to the awkward unscripted part where I show you how I put together the automation. Now all of this is already built, so I'm not actually going to be walking you through the creation process. I'm just going to show you what I've put together. Now before I created any automation, I actually started by creating a helper, and it's a input boolean called Halloween mode. And this is basically what starts the whole thing off. If I turn this on, then all of those Halloween automations can run. I'm using the Reolink Home Hub, and when you add the Reolink Home Hub to Home Assistant, it basically pulls in all of your cameras and devices. So you can see here, these are my devices, and I've got front door doorbell, and if I open that up, you can see I've got this visitor sensor. This visitor sensor is when somebody rings the doorbell. It's a binary sensor and it will turn on when the doorbell is pressed. I've also got this person sensor which will turn on when it detects human-based motion events. So those are the 2 sensors I'm going to be using in my automation. The third thing to show you then is my Halloween dashboard. Now this is where I'm showing all of the entities involved so as I can see what's going on and what's running at what time. So we've got the Halloween mode here, so I could turn on Halloween mode right now, which I won't, I'll do that in a second. And then you've got this Halloween mode run control. That's my automation, that should always be on. I've then got some scripts here which do various things. So we've got a one that cycles the porch lights in the orange and purple colours. I've got one that flashes them red. When the doorbell is pressed, they start flashing red sort of randomly. And then, oh, and this one here, a porch light red flicker. When motion is detected, it'll start doing like a little flicker of the red lights. It just adjusts the brightness values on those lights. And then this little bit here, doorbell ringer enabled, is on. All that does is, if that is on, then when you press the doorbell button, it will make a sound. If this gets turned off, then it won't make a sound. Now I'll show you why that's important now when we come to the automation. Let's have a look at this automation. Okay, so I've called it Halloween mode run control. Now we've got a number of when actions here. These used to be called triggers, but they're now called when. So we've got when Halloween mode changes to on, so that's when I toggle on this button here, it will actually have a trigger ID of Halloween on. Now it's quite important you note these trigger IDs here because this is how the automation knows what happened. We've got the same when Halloween mode changes to off, and the idea is when Halloween mode changes to off, it puts all the lights back to their default settings and turns things off. We've got when motion is detected, so when the front door doorbell detects a person, and we've got when motion has stopped for 1 minute, so no more motion anymore. And then lastly, when doorbell has been pressed, so doorbell ring is the name of that event. Then we've got some then do actions. Okay, these are the important bits. So I've got a choose option here. So when you add an action, I chose the type of event called choose. And option 1, Halloween on, start the scripts. So it's triggered by that Halloween being turned on event, and it confirms that Halloween mode is on, because we don't want this running if it has been turned on and then off quickly. It will then turn on my Halloween cycle porch light script, which is the purple and orange lights that are sort of cycles through. It'll then turn on those LEDs with the dancing shadows effect, and it will turn off the doorbell ringer. Now, the reason I want that doorbell ringer off is because when somebody presses the doorbell, I don't want it to go bing bong, I want it to do some special effects a little bit later on. So let's close option 1 down. Option 2 puts things back to normal. So there's a little bit of a delay while it sets the different modes on the lights, but I don't really want to go into that. That one's a bit boring. It's putting things back to normal. And then option number 3, motion detected. Now, it confirms Halloween mode is on because we don't want this firing if Halloween mode is not on. It will turn off the cycle porch lights. It will wait a second for that to finish. Then it will start flickering the porch lights red. So they start to adjust in brightnesses randomly. And that will happen. Oh, and then it also does the red breathe effect on the LEDs. And it does that until motion has stopped being detected. So if I go back up here, when motion has stopped for 1 minute, it's calling the trigger Halloween on. So that effectively puts everything back to normal. So it goes back to the cycling the porch lights. So if somebody walks past and they don't knock on the door or anything, then it'll just go back to how it was before. Lastly, Halloween doorbell has been pressed. Okay, we check that Halloween mode is on. That's very important. We then immediately play that special MP3 file, and it's called Halloween1.mp3, and all I did is I uploaded that using File Manager or File Editor to the www folder in your Home Assistant config directory, and that will play. I've used the Sonos from the conservatory, I've moved it to the garage, and it will play that immediately. So as soon as somebody presses the doorbell, they'll hear that really loud scream sound effect, and then there's a bit of an evil laugh afterwards. It'll delay for a second while it turns off the other presets and starts flashing the porch light and the light that's in this study window. It'll start flashing those red, and it'll also do the strobe effect. So it's a really fast red strobe effect that it will start flashing in my lounge windows. Anyway, I hope you can use my automation as inspiration to create your own little bit of Halloween mischief. I'll put links to the products I've used down in the description in case you want to take a look yourself. A massive thank you to my channel members listed here for supporting the channel. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member or even buy me a one-off coffee, then please check out the links in the description. Don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to my channel for free to see more from me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.